Well, you can tell Nintendo didn't spend 10 years making this. I'm certainly not the first person to point out that Nintendo's new Metroid game is missing a few things that Metroid fans tend to like, so you might be wondering why I would throw my hat in this already pretty crowded ring. What's the point, you might ask? For me, the point is to get some closure on this whole AM2R deal. You see, I've seen a lot of people arguing that Nintendo had to take down AM2R without answering the obvious question: what will take its place? Samus Returns isn't a good answer to this question, because it's so different from AM2R, and thus classic Metroid, that it's not filling the same niche. Here's what Nintendo's real answer seems to be. It's clear to me that Nintendo gave up on the Metroid fanbase a long time ago. AM2R would not have swept the internet if it was competing with new Metroid content on the level of Metroid Fusion. It would literally be just another Metroid II remake, and Nintendo would be enjoying the kudos that Milton Guasti received instead. However, since Nintendo seems to think that fans ought to treat Samus Returns as a legitimate replacement for AM2R, it's only fair to judge it on those terms. With that in mind, let's take a look at what AM2R got right that Samus Returns gets wrong. Obviously, the visuals are very derivative of Nintendo's own art assets, but both the copied and original assets harmonize nicely and look good. The camera keeps a nice distance from the player, allowing most of the room to be seen. Samus Returns has a horrible faux 3D style that makes every enemy look like a plastic toy and every background element like part of a Playmobil playset. I hate this kind of aesthetic, and it doesn't work for Metroid at all. The camera is zoomed in too far, often hiding enemies off screen and making it harder to navigate. There aren't any cutscenes. Cutscenes don't belong in a 2D Metroid. They distract from the atmosphere and make the viewer feel like the designer is leading them along, like a movie. As for the story, there really isn't one. Frankly, I don't care, do you? So in Samus Returns, they put cutscenes in, mostly to show things that any player with half a brain would figure out by, actually playing the game. And even with all those cutscenes, there still really isn't a story, because this game was made in 1992 for the Game Boy. In AM2R, the combat is pretty much the same as in previous Metroid games. It's nothing awe-inspiring, but most of the time it's fun and challenging. You can aim forward or tilt it up or down at a 45-degree angle. Because you're almost always moving, this is pretty adequate to hit any enemy. Samus Returns has an ill-advised emphasis on melee counters that turns this into a rhythm game with projectiles. You can aim in any direction, which sounds good, but actually makes for a god-awful mess as you overshoot and fiddle with the aiming controls. Enemies also move faster to compensate for this dubious enhancement. Why does Samus even have a gun in this game? The music in AM2R is great. There's some good remixes of earlier tracks, plus a few standout original compositions in the style of Metroid Prime. The music helps set a mood that's alternately serene, eerie, and at times triumphant. Somehow, Nintendo itself has made worse remixes of its own music than one guy working by himself. They're loud, blaring, and obnoxious. The original tracks are either boring sludge or tooth-grinding techno music with no hooks at all. The mood throughout is almost entirely non-existent. In AM2R, you just run around. Your character moves fast enough, and there's enough to see that this never really feels boring. Teleport stations! And believe me, you need them, because half of the rooms look exactly the same, and the heavy emphasis on combat makes backtracking a complete slog. The areas in AM2R have individual names, and each one has a unique atmosphere. You feel like you're exploring underground ruins, which have a history behind them. In Samus Returns, the areas are numbered from 1 to 7. You take literal elevators between them and practically walk through a turnstile at the end. You feel like you're in a theme park, and the theme is punch everything. AM2R basically is a classic Metroid game with just a few fresh ideas. It's fun and exciting, and it does everything a Metroid game should do. This free game is better than the $60 official release. Just think about that for a second. Samus Returns, on the other hand, is a combat-heavy reinterpretation of Metroid II with a plastic amiibo where its heart should be. It does about half of what a Metroid game should do, and a whole lot of other things that no game should do. I just have one last thing to say. Nintendo has changed a lot in the last decade. More than anything, what's changed is their attitude toward their franchises. A game like Hyrule Warriors could not have been made while Nintendo thought of Zelda as their most story-driven classic franchise. A game like Federation Force could not have been made while Nintendo thought of Metroid as a serious science fiction franchise, revolving around the thrill of exploration. I don't know if Nintendo still cares about telling great stories. I don't know if they understand why many fans have been disappointed in them for the last several years. But I do know that they care about money, because no company can survive without it. So here's my point, Nintendo. If you make mediocre games with pointless gimmicks that no one asked for, then treat your fans with contempt when no one buys them, and then when a serious fan of one of your franchises makes a tribute to it that brilliantly represents what it used to be, you deny fans the chance to experience it, just so you can market another mediocre game with pointless gimmicks that no one asked for? Well, don't expect my money anytime soon.